There is a pill that millions of people over 60 either take every day or have asked their doctor about. It is one of the most prescribed medications on earth. It was designed for type 2 diabetes, but over the last decade, it has become something else entirely, a longevity obsession. Researchers have studied it for its potential to slow aspects of aging. Podcasters talk about it constantly. Wellness influencers reference it the way they once referenced green tea. People who do not even have diabetes, whose blood sugar is perfectly normal, have walked into their doctor's office and asked for a prescription anyway, just in case it buys them a few extra good years. That pill is metformin, and here's the strange part. Almost nobody in that entire conversation can actually tell you how it works inside a cell. They know it lowers blood sugar, they know it has a reputation, they have heard it described as one of the safest, oldest, most studied drugs in medicine, and all of that is true. But the actual mechanism stays a black box. It gets treated almost like magic. You take the pill. Good things happen. Nobody asks why. Today, we are going to open that black box. Because once you understand the single switch metformin is reaching for, something becomes obvious. That same switch can be flipped another way. Not with a prescription, not with a supplement, you have to reorder every single month. With about 3 minutes of structured effort, done in the morning, before you eat anything. What I'm going to do is walk you through exactly what that switch is, why it matters far more after 60 than it did at 40, what the actual science shows, and the precise protocol step by step, so you can evaluate this for yourself with clear eyes. Let us get into it. The switch has a name. It is called AMPK, that stands for AMP-activated protein kinase, and I promise that is the most technical this is going to get. So forget the name almost immediately. Here's the only thing you need to hold on to. Think of AMPK as a fuel gauge. Every single cell in your body has one of these gauges. Its entire job is to monitor constantly how much energy the cell has on hand. Inside your cells, energy is carried around by a molecule called ATP. You can think of ATP as the cell's cash, the currency it spends to do everything it does. When ATP is plentiful, the fuel gauge reads full, and AMPK just sits there quietly. It does nothing because there is nothing to do. But when the cell starts burning through its energy faster than it can replace it, the gauge swings hard toward empty. And that swing toward empty is the trigger. That is the moment AMPK switches on. When AMPK switches on, it is essentially the cell sounding an alarm. The message is simple. We are running low. We need to act now. And the actions it triggers are genuinely remarkable. AMPK tells the cell to pull more glucose out of the bloodstream and use it. It tells the cell to start tapping into fat and burning it for fuel. It tells the cell to build more mitochondria so that next time, the cell is better equipped. And it does one more thing, one more critical thing that matters enormously for aging specifically. And I'm going to deliberately hold that one back for a few minutes because it deserves its own moment. So picture it clearly. AMPK is not some obscure piece of biochemistry trivia that only matters to researchers. It is a master control switch sitting right at the center of how your body handles energy, blood sugar, and fat. When it fires, your metabolism shifts into a cleaner, more efficient, more youthful mode of operation. When it stays quiet for years on end, things slowly drift in the opposite direction. That drift, accumulated over decades, is a real part of what we experience as metabolic aging. That is the switch. Hold on to that fuel gauge picture because now we can finally talk about the pill and what it is really doing. Here is the fact that reframes the entire conversation. Metformin's benefits are largely downstream of AMPK. The drug does not have some separate mysterious power. A great deal of what it does by way of that same switch. Metformin works in large part by mildly interfering with energy production inside the mitochondria. Read that again, because it sounds backwards. The drug gently, partially throttles the cell's ability to produce ATP. It puts a small, deliberate drag on the power plants. And what happens when ATP production gets throttled? Even a little, the fuel gauge swings toward empty. AMPK senses that swing. AMPK switches on. And all of those downstream effects follow from there in that order. So when someone takes metformin, what they are really doing at the level of the cell is nudging that fuel gauge toward empty on purpose so that the AMPK alarm goes off. The drug is essentially a way of reaching the switch. It is an indirect way. It is a gradual chemical taken with breakfast way. But that is what it is reaching for. The pill is a means. AMPK is the end. And once you see that clearly, the obvious question arrives entirely on its own. You do not have to be a scientist to ask it. If the real goal here is to activate AMPK, then is a pill genuinely the only road there? Or is there something your own body already knows how to do? Something built in that pulls the very same lever there is. And it is not exotic, and it is not new, and you do not have to buy it. Your body has a built-in, powerful, completely natural AMPK activator already installed. It is called intense muscular effort. The catch, and it is a real catch, is that most people, and especially most people after 60, are using that tool at a tiny fraction of its real power, or they have stopped using it altogether. So let me be very clear here about what I'm saying and what I'm absolutely not saying. I'm not saying throw away your prescription. I'm not saying skip your medication if you're on metformin or any medication at all. That is a conversation for you and your doctor, and nothing in a video on the internet changes that one bit. What I'm saying, the only thing I'm saying is that the mechanism the drug is chasing is one your own physiology can also reach, directly on its own. That is a fact worth understanding. What you do with it is your decision made with your physician. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, fine, but I have lived 60-some years on this earth without once thinking about a cellular fuel gauge, and I have done perfectly okay. So why does this suddenly matter now? Why now and not at 30? Because AMPK does not stay the same across your life. This is the key. Its responsiveness declines with age. The fuel gauge gets less sensitive over time. The alarm gets harder to trip, and even when it does fire, it tends to fire with less force than it did when you were young. Decade by decade, that signal gets quieter and a little duller. It is not that the switch breaks, it is that it gets stiff, and that quieting is not harmless background noise. A blunted AMPK response is tied to insulin resistance, that is your cells becoming sluggish and slow about pulling sugar out of the blood, which is the doorstep of a lot of metabolic trouble. It is tied to the gradual loss of muscle mass that doctors call sarcopenia. It is tied to falling mitochondrial density, fewer power plants per cell, and weaker ones. And it is tied to a slowdown in the cell's ability to clean and repair itself, to do its own housekeeping. Now genuinely think about what that list describes. Sit with it for a second. Insulin resistance, muscle loss, failing cellular power plants. A repair system running behind. After 60, the loss of muscle and the decline of metabolic health are not minor footnotes. They are among the strongest predictors of how the entire back half of life actually goes, how independent you stay, how steady you are on your feet, how well you recover from an illness, or a fall, or a surgery, how resilient you are when life hands you something hard. This is not a cosmetic concern. This is not about how you look in a mirror. This is the core of what researchers call health span. Not how long you live, but how many of those years you spend strong, capable, and yourself. And here is the part that should genuinely give you some optimism, because I do not want this to land as bad news. Restoring a sharp, responsive AMPK signal is one of the few interventions in this entire crowded, noisy space that has genuine, peer-reviewed research standing behind it. This is not wishful thinking. This is not a trend, and the most direct, most studied way to pull that lever is not something you order off a website. It is something you do with your own body. Which brings us finally to the discovery that changed how scientists think about exercise itself. For a very long time, exercise was understood mostly in terms of the slow stuff. Train for months, build endurance gradually, strengthen the heart over years. All of that is true, and all of it still matters. But that picture missed something. Something fast, something dramatic, happening at the cellular level within minutes of hard effort. Exercise physiology research has shown over and over that intense muscular work spikes AMPK in the working muscle quickly. Not over weeks, not over months, within minutes. You do one hard, genuine bout of effort, and the fuel gauge inside those specific muscle cells slams toward empty, and AMPK switches on fast and forcefully. And then there's the piece of research that truly reframed the whole picture. In 2012, a research team led by the scientist Beth Levine at UT Southwestern Medical Center published a study in the journal Nature, one of the most respected scientific journals in the world. They showed that brief, intense exercise triggered a powerful cellular response in muscle within about 30 minutes. That response was something called autophagy. Autophagy is the cell's own process of identifying its damaged, broken, worn-out internal parts, dismantling them, and recycling the raw material back into something useful. It is quite literally cellular housekeeping, self-cleaning. And here is the finding that mattered most. When Levine's team looked closely, that cellular cleanup was not just a pleasant side effect of exercise. It appeared to be part of the very mechanism through which exercise delivers a large share of its benefits in the first place. Now remember that one extra thing I said AMPK does, the thing I deliberately held back. This is it. This is the moment. When AMPK switches on, one of the things it does is suppress a pathway called mTOR. And mTOR, when it is active, functions as the brake that holds cellular cleanup in check. So follow the chain. AMPK on means mTOR push down, means the brake comes off, means the cell is finally free to start cleaning house. The fuel gauge hitting empty does not just shift your metabolism toward burning fat and sugar, it releases the brake on repair. That is the extra piece. That is why this matters for aging and not just for blood sugar. And human studies that actually take small muscle biopsies from real people before and after exercise, have confirmed the same pattern that was first mapped in the lab. Short, hard exercise lights up these pathways quickly in human muscle. The biology is consistent across the research. The takeaway is simple and honestly a little liberating, especially if the idea of long workouts has always felt like a wall. You do not need long workouts to move AMPK. You need intensity, which raises the very next obvious question: how short can it actually be and still work? The answer traces back to 1996 and to a Japanese researcher named Izumi Tabata, working at the National Institute of Fitness and Sports in Japan. Tabata tested a very specific structure on his subjects: 20 seconds of all-out, absolutely maximum effort, then 10 seconds of complete rest, not a slow jog, not light movement, actual rest, then repeat that pairing 8 times through. Add the working seconds up, and you land on exactly 4 minutes of actual effort. What he found genuinely surprised the exercise science community at the time. That 4-minute protocol produced improvements in both aerobic capacity, your endurance engine, and anaerobic capacity, your high-intensity, short-burst engine, that were comparable to roughly an hour of moderate steady-state cardio. 4 minutes of structured, brutal effort holding its own against 60 minutes of the conventional approach on key measures of fitness. That result reorganized how a lot of people thought about training. Now, the natural instinct when you hear 4 minutes is to treat the shortness as a limitation, a compromise, the least you can get away with, the lazy option dressed up. But that instinct is completely backwards. The brevity is not the weakness of the protocol. The brevity is the active ingredient. It is the whole point, because the protocol is so short, you are able to push yourself to a level of intensity that you could never, not ever, sustain for 30 or 60 minutes. No one can sprint for an hour, but anyone with the right build-up can sprint for 20 seconds. And it is precisely that extreme, unsustainable intensity that drives the fuel gauge hard and fast toward empty. It is that intensity that triggers the deep cellular stress response we have been talking about. A long, comfortable conversational effort simply never gets there, because by its nature it cannot. The discomfort of true intensity is only tolerable at all precisely because it is brief. Short is what makes hard possible. Hard is what makes it work. The protocol I'm going to give you in a moment is a slightly trimmed, more accessible version of that same interval principle, built specifically for someone who is over 60, who may not have trained hard in years or even decades, and who wants the cellular benefit without getting hurt reaching for it. But the engine underneath it is that Tabata structure. Short, hard, structured, repeated. And before I hand you the protocol itself, I want you to really understand the molecular reason it beats the long, easy version. Because once you genuinely understand it, you will never look at a slow, comfortable jog quite the same way again. Picture 2 people. The first goes out for a 40-minute jog at a relaxed conversational pace. The second does a few minutes of genuine all-out intervals. Both are exercising, but at the level of the cellular switch, they are not doing the same thing. The jogger's cells are keeping up, energy spent, energy replenished at roughly the same rate. The fuel gauge dips and holds. AMPK gets a nudge, modest, not nothing. The interval athlete cells are in a different situation entirely. A few minutes of all-out effort depletes cellular energy far more completely than prolonged moderate exercise. The gauge does not dip and hold, it plunges. And that sharp drop produces a correspondingly sharp AMPK spike. The alarm does not murmur, it blares. A sharper AMPK spike means deeper mTOR suppression. The brake does not just ease, it comes fully off. The cell shifts decisively toward cleanup, repair, and building fresh mitochondria. That is the molecular reason a few minutes of genuinely hard effort can outwork a 40-minute jog when your goal is metabolic switching. It is about how hard you swing that fuel gauge, and a brief, intense effort swings it harder than a long, gentle one ever can. So here is exactly how you do it. It begins with a warm-up. 2 to 3 minutes of easy movement, brisk walking, light cycling, gentle dynamic stretches. The warm-up is not optional. Its job is to raise core body temperature and get joints, tendons, and muscles ready to move hard. Cold tissue asked to perform suddenly is how people get hurt. Then come the work intervals, 20 seconds of all-out effort, 10 seconds of complete rest. Repeat. You are building toward roughly 3 minutes of structured work. If you're new to this, you do not start at full volume. I will come back to the build-up in a moment. Now, intensity. This is the part people get wrong most often. The target during work intervals is around 85 to 95% of your maximum heart rate. That is hard. That is meant to be hard. If you wear a heart rate monitor, watch for that range. If you do not, here is the field test. During a work interval, you should not be able to talk. I mean, genuinely should not be able to get a full sentence out. If you can hold a conversation during the hard part, you are not doing this protocol, you are exercising gently. The cellular switch knows the difference. The exercise modality is flexible. Stair climbing, stationary bike, or better for many people, a recumbent bike rowing machine. Kettlebell swings, bodyweight squats with explosive intent. If your knees are good, short hill sprints. The point is reaching that intensity in a way your body can tolerate. Bad knees or hips, use the bike or rower. Low impact options work completely. There is no single correct exercise. There is only the correct intensity. Reach safely, then a cool down. 2 to 3 minutes of easy movement, letting your heart rate come down gradually instead of slamming from maximum effort to standing still. The whole intervention runs about 8 to 9 minutes door to door. But understand where the actual medicine is. The active dose is those few hard minutes in the middle. Everything else is the wrapper. You are not being asked to carve an hour out of your morning. You are being asked to carve out less than 10 minutes, and only a few of those are hard. You could do this protocol at any time of day and get real benefit. But there is a specific window that stacks the deck in your favor. Morning, fasted, before you have eaten anything. For most people, that means mid-morning before breakfast. Here's what that timing does. When you wake after an overnight fast, glucose stores are already lower than after a meal. Your cellular fuel gauge is sitting closer to empty before you do anything. AMPK is already slightly primed. On top of that, your morning hormonal state is naturally tilted toward burning fat. Morning cortisol, an overnight elevated growth hormone, put your body in a fat-burning posture before you start moving. Layer intense exercise on top of that primed state, and the effect is larger than either piece alone. The fasting has nudged AMPK up and mTOR down. The workout slams both much further in the same direction. You are closer to multiplying than adding research on circadian biology, including work from Sachin Panda's lab at the Salk Institute, supports the broader idea that morning is a particularly responsive metabolic window. Your body is listening a little more closely at that hour, and there is a lasting tail. That switched-on cellular state does not vanish the instant you stop moving. It lingers for hours afterward. A few minutes of effort in the morning keeps quietly paying out across the rest of your day. Now let me pull this together into something you can start this week. Frequency, 3 mornings a week on non-consecutive days. Monday, Wednesday, Friday is the classic spacing. Those off days are not concessions. They are when your body actually builds the benefit the workout only stimulated. Hammering this every day does not speed results. It does the opposite. The refeed matters too. Within about 2 hours of finishing the workout, break your fast with 30 to 40 grams of quality protein. Eggs, Greek yogurt, whey protein shake, fish, chicken. You have just sent a powerful repair and build signal to muscle tissue. Giving it good protein inside that window is how you hold on to the muscle you're working to preserve. And after 60, preserving muscle is honestly a huge part of the point. Now the safety rules, these matter, and glossing over them would be irresponsible. If you have uncontrolled high blood pressure, this protocol is not for you, not until that pressure is managed and your doctor specifically clears you. All-out effort produces real blood pressure spikes, and for someone with poorly controlled pressure, that is a genuine danger. If you have any history of heart disease, you need medical clearance before attempting this. Full stop, no exceptions. If you are diabetic and on insulin or sulfonylurea, intense exercise in a fasted state can drop blood sugar in ways those medications amplify. You need to monitor your glucose, and you need medical guidance before starting. And to say the most obvious thing of all, do not change, do not reduce, and do not stop any prescribed medication because of something you watched online. That decision belongs in the room between you and your physician. For everyone cleared and ready to start, if you have not trained hard in years, you do not begin at full volume. Start with 3 rounds, just 3 20-second efforts with the rest between them. Do exactly that for a week or 2. Then add 1 round, then another. Let your body build into this gradually. Trying to do 8 all-out rounds on your first morning after years away from hard training is not impressive. It is how you end up injured. Earn the volume, respect the build-up. Here is the bottom line. Stated honestly, this is not a medication replacement. It is not a miracle. What it actually is a few minutes of structured effort, 3 times a week, that pull the same metabolic lever the drug is reaching for, through your own physiology with peer-reviewed research standing behind the mechanism at no cost beyond the effort itself. Give it 6 to 8 weeks of consistency and track the things that tell the real story. Your resting heart rate in the morning, it should trend down. Your waist circumference, how quickly you recover your breath between intervals, your energy through the day. Those numbers, measured on your own body over weeks, are your honest feedback. Not a podcast, not a headline, your own data. The longevity industry has a strong financial incentive to make all of this sound complicated, exotic, and expensive, to make it sound like something you must buy monthly for the rest of your life. But the actual underlying biology points somewhere much simpler: a switch inside your cells, a few genuinely hard minutes in the morning, and a body that even well after 60 still knows exactly what to do when you finally ask it the right question in the right way. If this was useful to you, that is exactly what this channel is here for. Take good care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.